Hello, folks. Looks like we are live. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. 7:34. I am checking my pistol caliber carbines. I almost said pistol caliber carbine rifles. That doesn't make any sense, does it? Anyways, folks, sorry about that. 7:34. Apparently, I was a few minutes late, so I've got a little rack of carbine sitting next to me. Good morning. Good morning. Looks like we have several people on. 32 people on. That is so freaky. Man, someone click that like button a couple times and click the heart button and click the share button, and let's see if we can double that instantaneously. The number, it's weird. My screen shows me the number and it was like 5, and then I looked over again, it was 45. So that's pretty darn impressive. I am live this morning on Wednesday morning. If you would give me a video and an audio check. I think the video is good to go. Just make sure the audio is good. My camera here is a little funky on to the left. My camera looks like it's sitting off to the left. Anyways, we're going to get into it. And who do we have here this morning? Good morning, IDPA. Chris is on. Tony's on. Hello, John. Hello. How are you, sir? Adrian, nice to see you. Craig is on. Good to see you. 70 people live. Phil Strader's on. Man. And he says something like, too bad I'm not dead this morning. Wow, Phil Strader, that's not very nice. Hey, if you have the ability, invite some friends. Send a text message. Click the share button. I'm going to do a little safety briefing, and we're going to get right into, I called this live stream Recoil Control Secrets. I'm not sure what that means, but it sounded cool for the internet. So we're talking PCC. I'm going to show you 2 PCCs. I'm going to talk to you about your PCC setup. I'm going to show you 1 PCC with a little bit heavier barrel, 1 PCC with the shorter, lighter barrel and barrel shroud. I'm going to show you 2 different charging handles. We're going to talk about some different options in terms of PCC. And then we're going to go through some of the basics of positioning a carbine or rifle on your shoulder for maximum recoil control, and then we'll do some Q&A. Should be a nice live stream, and I know Chris was wanting PCC forever, so she is super excited. So who else do we have on here? Ravi Kumar. Good morning, Ravi. By the way, if you're one of my coin members, type your coin member number in there. So if you're coin member number 3, which you probably aren't because 3 is like one of the first few, right? Happens to be a family member. Type your coin member number, and if you're ACSS, please do that as well. So let's talk about safety first. If you are going to train with me this morning, I want you to do me a big favor. I want you to make sure that you have an unloaded and clear firearm and that you have no live ammunition. I know you can't see inside the chamber of this beautiful Wilson Combat AR-9G, but that chamber is in fact clear. This is my second one. This is probably my favorite one because as you can see, it's my favorite color blue. Now, here's the deal. I wore my red shirt today to contrast the blue color of my beautiful PCC. By the way, this one happens to have a shroud on it. So this is an aluminum shroud that goes over a barrel that makes the front end of the gun a little bit lighter. We'll talk about that as well. But this bad boy is unloaded and clear as well. I've got a clear chamber. So do me a favor, if you would, if you're going to train along with me, make sure you have no live ammunition. And then if you're going to grab your PCC, it is in fact unloaded as well. And make sure we're going to comply by all safety rules. If you're going to do a little bit of dry firing with me, make sure you have a safe backstop. You know, I have children's bedrooms in various directions in this house. So make sure if you're doing that, you comply by all safety rules to and include the dry fire safety rules. Safe backstop, trigger finger off the trigger so you're ready to shoot, muzzle direction, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so 72 people live stream. That is freaking incredible. That fast. I think we're going to hit 150 today, maybe 190. Who do we have on? Let's see. Joey, coin number 175. That's probably pretty low. Joey Russo is going to be hard to beat. Akeem, number 2441. And you shared. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Luis Klausenberg. I think we had Luis on last week as well. And Joey says color coordination is important. Yeah, I agree with that. Alan Kelly, good morning. Yes, my PCCs are blowback. I don't own a PCC that's not a blowback gun. Matter of fact, I think non-blowback PCCs are pretty rare. There are couple companies that make a combo blowback gas gun. When I'm talking about blowback, let's define that while you're clicking the share button and tell people we're on. When you're looking at a standard AR system, most of you know that most standard AR systems, and I'm talking about the original configuration, are what we call gas guns, which means that the bolt carrier group inside the frame itself has a gas tube, right? And that gas tube basically travels down the top of the gun and then eventually cycles the bolt, right? So the gas from the barrel, when you fire the gun, goes down the tube and pushes the bolt to the rear. Now, blowback simply means that the blowback of the actual cartridge is what cycles the bolt. Sometimes I guess a blowback gun might feel like it hits a little bit harder in terms of recoil control. But blowback systems, these PCCs are blowback systems, and there are a lot of different variants out there of firearms that are blowback, are typically inherently reliable. They're very, very reliable because they don't have a gas system that gets dirty or whatever else. So Wilson Combat makes, of course, gas systems, gas guns in their ARs, and the standard 223 and 308 and 300 hammer, but their PCCs are in fact blowback guns. This is the AR9G. So let me just show off the PCCs and we'll get going. We'll talk more about who we have on this morning. So these are my two PCCs. They're set up pretty much identical. I have competed with both of them, but full disclosure, I'm not doing a lot of PCC this year. This year I shot some single stack, or attempted to shoot single stack. I didn't shoot really great this year. And now I have been shooting carry optics, the new rage after PCC, because if you remember, for a while, the PCC rage was the thing. It's like everybody was getting a PCC. It was super exciting. It gave people the ability to compete on a USPSA or IDPA stage with a rifle, carbine, pistol caliber carbine. These are both 9mm. And it's fun. It's about as much fun as you could possibly have with a gun. So that's the important thing. Now, in terms of these two guns, I'll talk about them here in a second. They're pretty much identical. Of course, the color's different. The optics are mounted in the same spot. The optic colors are different. One has a red optic. One has a green optic. We'll also talk about the optic mounting position. You may say, well, Mike, why is your optic mounted, farther forward on these guns? Why do I mount my optic here versus here, a little bit farther back? We'll talk about my experimentation there. We'll talk a little bit about stock length, what you should consider in terms of your stock length. We'll talk about the charging handle. In my case, this is an ambi charging handle. I like an ambi charging handle. These are ambi safeties. Why do I run an ambi safety? And then we'll talk about handguard length and stuff like that when we get going. We have almost 100 people on, folks. This is really exciting. I don't think we hit 100 last week. And who else do we have on? Hey, Brandon Powers, how are you? Ben Gibson from Australia, and g'day. Is that right, Ben? G'day. I wish you could sound like a sound file. I could play it. G'day. That's pretty cool. John Dalton, good morning. Number 651. How are you, sir? James Goff. Hey, how are you? Daniel McGee. Jay in Hawaii. How are you, sir? Number 188. That's pretty low. Code number 2. Christopher Perez. How are you from Brooklyn? Good morning, Brooklyn. Pre Johnson. Nice to see you here. Pre Johnson, your problem with the PCC is your failure to feed. Oh man, I can't tell you what the problem is there. That could be a lot of different things. I could tell you the Wilson Combat, and folks, full disclosure, I'm sponsored by Wilson Combat. I'm going to show you Wilson Combats today. But I own several other PCCs. I own a couple of JP John Paul PCCs, and they're fantastic systems. But I'll talk about these, and I can tell you these are pretty inherently reliable. The only problem that we as a company and me personally have had with these a lot, have been firing pin breakages, and I think that's a very common thing in a lot of these PCCs. A while ago, we built up our firing pins to be pretty robust. They changed some of the cut angles on the firing pin itself, and since then, I've not broken a firing pin. I can also tell you, if you're dry firing a PCC a lot and you're letting that bolt go forward, and you're dry firing and cycling with that firing pin, my suggestion to you on that might be to use a dry fire bolt and a live fire bolt. So use one bolt for dry fire and then throw another bolt in for your matching or whatever else. But as far as Pre Johnson, is that That's an interesting name. Can't tell you what's wrong with your gun. I don't know why it feeds. I don't know if it's bullet like that. There's too many variables for me to assess, but I can tell you this, when I say AR9G, that means it's the Glock variant. So this runs the Glock magazines. These guys are inherently reliable, like very, very, very reliable in terms of feeding, assuming they're clean. Now understand that a blowback type system, a blowback PCC system is going to be a little bit dirtier because every time you fire, all of the smoke and unburnt powder and debris or whatever else actually ends up in your chamber. Okay. Let's see what we have on. And by the way, we went from 95 to 87. That's too bad. Maybe I'm not very exciting this morning. Good morning, Travis Fitch. How are you? Bob Lou, Sheila McKinney. Good morning, PCC. You're right. It is. Arek Jazwinski, man, Poland. Good morning, Poland. We have so many people on. This is exciting. And Pre Johnson's from the Philippines. David Louie, missed you too as well. Okay. All right. So if you haven't, and I know I've said this several times, I'm kind of excited. I thought we would hit 100. If you haven't told people about this or click share, please do so because I want to break 100 today. All you got to do is take 2 minutes, click share. You could select a group, or you could share it to your Facebook wall, or you could share it to a page. You could share it to a page that has a lot of people that may be interested in this material. So what I want to do is let's talk about setting up your PCC from the back of the gun forward, and then we'll do some Q&A. And I'm a little bit limited on time today, so I'm going to try to go through this pretty efficiently if I possibly can. And I'll jump on and I'll look at your questions. But if you have a question, please hold them. If you're just jumping on, my name is Mike Seeklander. Welcome. If you're wondering about me or want to learn more about me, there's material in the description of this website. I think EPA may share that, as well as a program. I designed a training program for if you're a PCC shooter that you can follow along session by session. So from the back of the gun, let's talk about the stock first. There is a tendency for folks to collapse their stock and shoot from what I call a compressed position more often than not. Meaning I see this commonly in rifle classes, and I see it with folks that are shooting PCC. Well, they'll take that stock, which is a collapsible stock, and they'll collapse it. So this is the fully extended stock position. And I see folks shooting from maybe, let's say, 2 notches down to collapsed, or maybe even farther down. And the thought there is then they could pull the stock all the way back and they can get wrapped around the gun and do this kind of crap, right? Now I'm going to tell you, this is not the most efficient way to control a rifle or a PCC. Matter of fact, you are in a very weak position here in terms of the recoil control, because remember, to control the recoil on any long gun system, we have to create a position where the stock is maintaining contact with our body, and then we have to have enough pressure between the stock and our body so when the gun recoils, it doesn't move. Now, the farther my gun is closer to my body, the weaker my arms are. You can imagine if we were to do a tug of war, and I started with a bent elbow like this, and I grabbed the rope, and you pull, boom, you would extend my arm, right? But if we did a tug of war and I extended here, if you're, to do a tug of war, if you can imagine, you're doing a tug of war with me, I would reach out and I would grab the rope like this, and I would try to pull the rope back. I wouldn't start like this, because the second you pull, boom, my arms go like this. So when we're talking about the control position of the rifle PCC, this is not optimum, right? This lead hand is in the wrong position. The stock is collapsed too much. So get your stocks extended as far as they will go, where you can still effectively reach the trigger and the controls. So if your arms are long enough where you can have a fully extended stock, extend your stocks all the way. Stop collapsing your stocks, okay? Now, in terms of mine, this is as far as it goes. This is originally the Rogers Surefire, or Rogers Super Stock, designed by Bill Rogers, a buddy of mine from years ago. I think he's retired and not doing much these days. But that's what this is. In this case, it's got basically a button that allows me to collapse it or extend it and then lock it down. So I'm going to extend my stock fully and lock it down. Okay, there's the number one PCC setup recommendation. Okay, now moving forward on the gun, I want to talk about 2 different things. I'm going to show you both sides of the gun. If you can see the left and the right-hand side of the gun. Number one, both my charging handle and my safeties are ambi, right? So that allows me to work the safety off my right shoulder or work the safety off my left shoulder. It also allows me to use the charging handle with my left shoulder or my right shoulder. Now, granted, if I'm shooting a stage in PCC and I've had to shoot a couple shots and maybe transition to the other side, I'm not probably going to use that charging handle. But man, in this position, if I had a malfunction and I had to clear it, and do something with the charging handle, that's going to be a lot faster in this position than going, okay, boom, I've got a malfunction. I got to transition back, clear it, and then go back to the other shoulder. So that's something I would strongly recommend. And one thing you're going to find is the charging handles and the way I set my PCCs up to an extent mimics the my standard AR systems, right? So I want an ambi charging handle on my standard AR system. It makes sense to me. I also have an ambi safety, so I can be wiping the safety off with both my, my strong hand and my support hand. If you don't have that ambi safety, your only option, if the safety is on during the start, is to wipe it off with your index finger, which is okay, but it's a little tougher manipulation, or to take that thumb and reach across the gun and wipe it off like this. And I don't like this because this is not a good control position for me. I just don't like that control position. And I'm not saying it's wrong, right? One of the things that we see oftentimes is, here's a technique. On the internet, that's wrong. I'm not saying anything's wrong. I'm just telling you what I prefer, right? By the way, we have 110. So whoever shared it, I'm going to say thank you. You all are freaking awesome. We get 110. We beat 100 today. That is incredible. To have 100 and some live streamers on at any given point is pretty damn impressive, okay? We'll talk about the Optic here in just a second, Bob, okay? So anyways, stock first, extend it all the way. Number 2, consider an ambi charging handle and an ambi safety. That allows me to work the safety or the charging handle on both sides, okay? Now, moving forward on the gun, let's talk about the trigger first, and then I'll talk a little bit about the magwell and the Optic. My triggers are Wilson Combat triggers. Like I said, full disclosure, I shoot for Wilson Combat. But they are what we call our 3-gun trigger. So my triggers are, this is actually technically, I believe, a 2-stage trigger and how it's built or set up. But it's got a very light kind of rolly feel to it, right? But there's not, if you look at my trigger, if I touch the trigger, you'll notice there's no pre-travel before the gun goes off, right? But there's a little more movement in terms of how I pull the trigger. Some folks like a 2-stage trigger. So a 2-stage trigger on a rifle or PCC would have, if I were manipulating the trigger, there would be a little bit of slack, and then you would feel the wall, much like we talk about on a handgun, and then you would pull through. And with a rifle or PCC, that facilitates a little more precision, right? In my case, I don't need that extra little bit of take up because I'm not shooting the gun, from a rest for extreme precision. We're talking about PCC. We're shooting most shots at 20 yards or in, maybe out to 30 or 40 yards if it's a really good PCC match. So I just need a really light and fast trigger to work. Now, granted, I would probably prefer a longer, straighter trigger. I have the curve variant because that's what I put on these guns originally. But the farther my trigger finger gets away from the web in my hand, the faster I can pull the trigger, right? So if I could put a longer trigger that sets farther away from the web of my hand, I would probably do so. I'm not sure if I'm showing you a good view of this on the camera. I think you can see this okay there. All right, so that would allow to facilitate a little bit farther position and faster trigger finger move, okay? Now, my magwells, I love these magwells. These are both the Techwell magwell. Let me give you a different close-up so you can see the actual name. A long time ago, Bob Novak came to me and said at the SHOT Show or wherever we were, he said, Mike, we need to make one of our Techwells for your Wilson Combat AR-9G lower AR-9 variant. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And they did. By far my favorite magwell. This magwell is basically, it's a Delrin. It's like a very hard plastic, so it's very light. But the way the the magwell actually mounts and adjusts is with this couple set screws and a small piece of, I guess it's an offset piece of Delrin, I can move my magwell back and forward, right? But you know, if you're going to do PCC and you have to do a load off the shoulder, you're going to have a big magwell. And our our AR9Gs, Wilson Combat AR9Gs, they have a pretty big magwell anyways, but man, I'm going to go with a bigger magwell every time I can. By the way, Techwell is my favorite magwell for this, as well as 1911s. I do have an affiliation with them. They're good people. Everybody I have an affiliation with is good people. That's why I shoot for Wilson Combat. That's why I love Techwells and a couple other companies out there. Anyways, if you're looking for a good magwell, look for a Techwell for your PCC. Okay. By the way, let's see if I want to make sure I'm not missing any questions. Good morning, Dell from Florida. How are you? John Dent, y'all from Alabama. Good morning. Pascal Lamarco. Nice to see you. Esteban Hernandez. Buenos dias. Good, from Chile. Oh, nice. That's incredible. Okay, so Bob Lou asked about my Optic. Good morning, Bob Lou. So these are the Holosuns. I actually have two different variants on here. This one, make sure I have this. Yeah, this one is the red one, and this one is a red one as well. Apparently, I put the green one on one of my rifles. Now, I have red and red on these two guns, but originally, I used to have red and green. I had a red optic on one, and I had a green optic on the other. And the green, to me, it almost looks yellow because I started to play with the difference in terms of color and contrast, right? So I started to experiment with color and contrast on the range, and I wanted to see if there was one that allowed me to pick up that optic or that dot faster on both steel targets and paper targets in varying light conditions. And that's one thing I do a lot. For those of you that don't know me or follow my programs, I'm oftentimes varying when I train. So maybe one practice session will be at 8 o'clock in the morning. The next practice session will be at 6 o'clock at night. So I have two opposite or extremes in terms of light condition. So I started playing with my optic colors and saying, hey, which one do I pick up faster? Do I pick up the red optic first or faster? Or do I pick up the green or the yellowish optic faster? And here's what I found. I have an answer for you. And unfortunately, it's not that exciting. I found that they're about equal. The green yellowish one tends to be a little brighter to me. Of course, you know, I am red-green colorblind. That doesn't mean I can't see red. Like I know I have a reddish shirt on, right? This is red. Hopefully I'm right about that, right? I can see colors. I just don't see them like you all see colors. But what I found is that the colors is pretty equal, but red optics are more common. So now I have mostly red optics. So I pick my red optic up on my PCC or a rifle or a handgun, and it's always the same color. But play with stuff like that. Now, the second thing, and by the way, these are the what is this? This is they have so many different variants. This is the 510C, right? So in terms of Holosun, they have a bunch of different variations. You can see the little solar panels on that. And by the way, Holosun is not a sponsor of mine. They gave me a couple optics years ago. But I've been running Holosuns on a lot of different guns. It's not my only and favorite optic, but it's a really, really good optic. And these two optics, I have used them. I have abused them. I have thrown them on the ground. I've been in pouring rain, just leaving the PCC and rifle sitting in the rain. They're really solid optics. I'm very, very happy with these optics so far. Just a hardcore solid gun. I actually have these optics on some of my home defense ARs as well, and a vehicle defense AR. Okay. Now let's talk about position. In terms of position on the gun itself, you may say, "Well, Mike, why is your optic mounted forward? It's as far forward as I can get it on this lower receiver, versus back here." And the schools of thought are the closer your optic is toward your eye, the bigger the window looks, right? So you might be able to see more of the target through the optic, right? The farther away the optic is, the smaller the window. But for me, I have found that the distance of the optic, when it's a little bit farther away, it opens up my overall field of vision, and it makes for a little bit faster transitions in terms of shooting the gun. Now, once again, that said, you may say, well, Mike, have you tested that? Yes. So let me tell you about my little test. I had these two PCCs set up. I had one PC set up with the Optic up here, and then I had a second PC set up with the Optic back here. And I left them that way, and I trained with both guns for a period of weeks, trying to figure out which position of the Optic I like better. And I would shoot one and think, oh, I definitely like that better. I definitely like the forward Optic position better. And then I would pick up the other one out and think, oh man, I actually think I like this better. And I went back and forth, and you know what I found? Similar to Optic color, it doesn't make a tremendous difference. I ended up leaning just a little bit toward the forward Optic position. I do think that occludes my vision a little less, because instead of it being here, the Optic is here. So it opens up my field of view. I think that makes my transitions a little bit faster. It translates to my defensive rifle setup, which opens up my field of view a little bit more. So I would suggest, if you haven't played with this, that you would consider mounting your Optic forward and running like that for a while and see if you like that. By the way, we got 109 on, almost 110. Well, I sip of coffee here. Maybe you can click the share button if you're just jumping on. Oh, that's not very good coffee. It was good earlier when it was hot, but I've been talking so much it's not even hot anymore. So I need someone to send me some good coffee. I love coffee. By the way, that's my thing. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this real quick. And thank you, Tina, for sharing. Appreciate that, Sheila, as well. And Sheila, you're right. They have a yellow or gold dot as well. I have not shot the yellow dot. I've seen it, but I haven't shot it. And I would bet I might like that. My fear of the yellow dot was it seems to be very similar to the color of an IDPA or USPSA target when the sun's on it. So when that target is lit up, that target goes from tan to almost a bright tan. I wonder if that gold dot would look. Well, I wonder what it would look like, but I don't have that one. I have the green one and the red one as well. Okay. So Bob, in terms of the optics of the handguard, the Optic does not sit on the front of the handguard. If you could see, the mounting screw is right here. So I have the mounting screw going through the last notch on the upper receiver. Now, granted, it tends to look like it's up here, but remember, if your rails are lined up like they should be, it doesn't make any difference whatsoever. So that's as far forward as I can get the Optic on the normal receiver. Now, maybe you might say, well, Mike, why not mount it up here? I don't know. I don't think that's a good position, but that's not going to move. But I've never tried that, so I'm not going to poo-poo on it. It might be good. I don't know. Man, my Optic is dirty. That's what happens when you have blowback guns. Is they're very, very dirty. Joey Russo asked about offset. Since we're talking about optics, let's talk about offset optics and lasers. So a lot of folks are running an Optic, and they're running a second Optic on the side. Now let's also do complete and utter full disclosure. You can listen to me and buy what I'm selling or not. I won't take it personal. There are folks out there that run an offset optic. And the reason they run an offset optic is so if they get into a left lean position, so you can imagine a wall edge right here. When they get that position, they roll the gun up and they use the offset optic. That allows them to get onto a target they can't get with their primary optic. And I'm going to give you a little secret that will help you solve that, which is the reason I don't have an offset optic. I don't find the need for one. And I call it the extreme rollout. So if you can imagine, I should have brought my barricade in here. My PCC is on the edge of a wall, and I can only get this far. This is the edge of the wall. I can shoot at a target right there, okay? This is the edge of the wall. I can't go any farther. Now, if I take my PCC and my elbow and I rotate them with this elbow straight up in the air, I immediately gain another several feet of distance on the same mechanical point. So by rolling the gun up, I can actually rotate my body in, and I can shoot targets way deeper than I would have before. So I found when I come into those positions, right, I will literally roll my body up. I call it point the elbow toward the sky, and I'm maintaining the same stock position. And believe it, if you have the athleticism, you don't have back problems, whatever, that allows me to shoot targets that I would with an offset optic. So I've never been a fan of offset optics, but I'm not poo-pooing on them either if you have to set them up. The same thing about the lasers. A lot of folks are putting a laser on the gun. They'll get into a weird position. Boom, they'll use that laser. I have not found many positions where a laser to be that valuable. And I think if you put a laser on a PCC, you really got to train activating and using the laser. Once again, I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just saying I haven't found the value in a laser on a PCC. There just hasn't been enough times in a stage where it was necessary for me to do that. Okay. Let's see here. Oh, Sheila, good question. What distance am I going to zero my PCCs? Now, that's going to vary based on the height of your optic, of course, the length of your barrel, the grain of your bullet, right, and velocity. So it's going to vary on several things, but generally speaking, you probably want to zero your PCC for somewhere around 30 yards. 30 to 40 yards is going to give you the best overall mechanical advantage at closer targets and maybe that extreme distance target. That said, a heavier bullet is going to have a different trajectory than a lighter bullet, but generally speaking, probably around 30 yards, maybe 35 yards for a general zero, and then shoot it at 10 yards, shoot it at 5 yards, shoot it at 50 yards, and find out exactly where your point of impact is, and then adjust from there. Now, if I go to a match, and I know this is a precision match, which is rare, I don't shoot a lot of PCC these days, I may vary that a little bit. So that's my general answer. Okay, so we talked about optic position, we talked about magwell, we've talked about stock forward. We've taken this PCC. It's time to switch. This is not the prettiest one I have, so let me go to my pretty gun. Then we'll do a little bit of Q&A. I don't have a lot more time. Okay, much prettier blue. So the reason I wanted to switch is because I wanted to show you immediately, and this one is easier for me to hold up. Do you know why this one is easier to hold up? Because this has about a 7 or 8 inch barrel and then aluminum shroud permanently mounted to that barrel, right? So this counts as a barrel in terms of the length, overall length itself, but it's a shroud. It's basically an aluminum shroud that makes the front end of this gun, I mean, I literally can do this without having any effort or work, right? It's way lighter than this is heavy on the front end, right? So if this light, right, front end of the gun, then theoretically that allows me to take the front end of the gun and drive it to the next target and stop that front end a little faster. This actually was given to me by my buddy and fellow sponsored shooter, Ian, and they were running shrouds on their guns. It sounds different as far as recoil and whatever. There's not a ton of difference. So I think the advantage here is it just becomes, so light you can mount it faster, you can move the gun faster. Maybe you can move faster because the front end of the gun is a little bit lighter. I like the weight here. I don't like a lot of weight out here because the more weight there is on the front of the barrel, the more the gun stops like that, if that makes any sense. Okay. Yes, Craig, I will talk about that as well. Let's see here. What else do we have here? Okay, I don't see. Oh, Patrick asked about dot sizes on position as well. You're exactly right. So Patrick Kennedy, the farther your optic is away, it changes the relationship of your eye and the dot size looks bigger. So a 2 MOA dot will look different if it's here versus here. I could look at this dot and it looks pretty big. The dot starts to get a little bit smaller as I get farther out. Also, right now, the dot is very tiny. I look kind of like a dork when I do this. The optic dot is tiny in the window, and now, like out here, the circle is much bigger in the window. By the way, I don't know if you can see this on the camera. Sometimes I'm able to do this. There it is. You can see I have the round dot, right? the full round one set up in the PCC. I have them both turned on. Man, I tell you, for as far as optics, for PCC and carry optics and defensive carry optics, my rule for myself, and I believe to be true, right? We're always experimenting. Bigger, brighter is better. Now, I'm not saying bigger, brighter is always better for some specific competition uses, like a very hard precision shot where you might have a 12 MOA dot. But bigger, brighter is better for speed and defensive and competitive applications in most cases. For example, on these dots, I run the circle, the center dot for precision. I run the outside, so I run the whole reticle. By the way, the Holosuns are multiple reticle patterns, so you can switch out the reticle by holding down the little minus or plus sign on the optic itself. Okay. So Donald's asking, any significant difference between PCC with a standard barrel, PCC SBR, and pistol with a brace? So here's the deal. These are standard length, right? Standard length stocks. I don't know if you can compete with a PCC with an arm brace or not. But with all the weird crap with the ATF, I own one of those, but it's for home defense or vehicle defense purposes and application. I don't know if you can legally compete with them. Maybe IDPA can answer that, or maybe one of USPSA shooters can answer that. I don't think there's a big difference. Those shorter guns, I don't think they're as easy control. They might be a little easier, to move around things, but I'm not that worried about that. So okay, yeah. And Craig just answered the question. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay, so real quickly, let's talk about the basic position or mounting technique. When I teach a rifle or carbine class, I always talk about drop, drive, pull, press, drop, drive, pull, press. So number one, if my handgun stance is where my feet are wider than my shoulder, and generally speaking, my feet are square, but my right foot is slightly back. Now, my foot position is going to depend on balance on what I'm doing. Understand, it's not a range stance and it has to be perfect. My foot position is always going to be dictated by what I'm doing or what I'm doing next. With a handgun, right, this would be my shooting position. You can see my shooting stance. This is actually pretty cool that I can do this. This is light enough to do this. So this is my handgun shooting stance. Nice, squared, wide, and aggressive. Now, if I take this position and I simply drive the PCC straight back to a center of the body as centered as I could possibly get it, and then extend my hand to the same position that I held my handgun with, this is my shooting position. So once again, handgun, bring it back, put my hand back where my handgun was when I shot a handgun, right? Because that's the best position to control for my handgun. It's going to be similar for my PCC. Now, if you notice that my hand is quite a ways out there in my handguard, but I'm not taking my arm and hyperextending it like this. I haven't found that's an advantage. For me, it's hard to move the gun like this. It's just not comfortable. So I've got a little bit of a bend. But I'm certainly, absolutely, positively not doing this kind of crap. We talked about that in the beginning of the live stream, where folks are collapsing the stock too much and they're trying to wrap their body around the rifle. That's a no-go. I know you see that on TV and maybe YouTube, and there's some utility, very tight spaces, maybe shipboard or whatever else, but that's the only place I would use that. This is not fast to move the gun left or right or stop the gun, and it's not strong if you have to fight for your rifle. I know I'm talking about defensive stuff. We're shooting a pistol match. Hopefully you're not having to fight for your PCC. But I kind of like to teach it like this. This is my handgun stance. Bring the stock straight back and then grab a hold of the handgun. Now, I like to have a nice high grip on the pistol grip, right? Your thumb is always going to ride that safety. And then once I get into positions, right, I'm going to drop, drive, pull, press. Let me talk to you what I mean by that, and we'll do a little Q&A. I don't have a ton more time here. I'm going to take the elbow, and I'm going to drop the elbow, okay? Drop. I'm going to drive my shoulder into the gun. So I'm pretty darn squared up when I shoot this. Drop, drive the shoulder forward, okay? My shoulders, if you can see this, are pretty square. Pull. I'm going to pull the stock into my body, and I'm going to press my cheek down into the cheek weld itself. Believe it or not, pressing your cheek into the stock or into the cheek weld stabilizes the back of the gun more. I find when I press my cheek into the gun itself, the dot settles down. Now, when I'm practicing this, oftentimes I'll practice, from a stock on belt position, where for me, if you're doing this, I'm going to find that target, and I'm going to line my right eye up, and I'm going to line the muzzle up with that target. Then I'm going to drive the gun off of my body so the stock moves fast. If you try to drag it up your body, it won't move as fast. So I'm taking the gun off of my body, making contact, and then pulling it straight back. And when I practice a lot of dry fire, I'm actually taking that gun and jamming it in my face, right? Notice you hear the safety clicking off every single time, right? Okay, and it's a fast motion, not a lot of head motion, right? And when I practice my multi-position mount, I'm practicing, from this position, okay? And then I'll practice the lower ready position. This might be more utility for defensive. I don't know if we start a lot with the low position. I know sometimes it's still a challenge we do it, but I'm going to practice the same thing. Driving the gun up and then drop, drive, pull, press. Right? It's a snapping motion. Right? And then I'll go over the shoulder. Right? Can you hear that violence of the snapping of the mounting of the PCC? Because I'm trying to gain as much speed as I possibly can. But once again, to remind you, drop, drive, pull, press. Drop, drive, pull, press. Strong side thumb always rides and pushes down on the safety, so the safety never ends up getting turned back on. Man, that was a lot of work. Hey, Yale, how are you? From, I think, Israel. Good morning. Brett, stay strong, Patriot. All right, let's see what else I have here. Yes, there you go. You're welcome. I just read your comment. Patrick, I found overextending grip slows down transmission. I totally agree, and that's why I don't do it. I like a little bit of a compressed position. It's when I figured it out, when I finally realized, wait a second, my rifle position is literally the exact same spot I found where my arms are with my handgun. That makes sense. I extend the handgun to a specific position because I can stop and lock the gun down there, and I can move it faster. So when I'm shooting my rifle, well, geez, why not do the same position, right? And if you notice, that my handguard is set up for that. Now, one more thing in terms of lead hand here. Keep track of my time. I don't like to run that finger like this. The reason I don't, it's not bad, it's not wrong, is because then I can't quick brace like I'll show you from a distance. I can't do a fast quick brace up against the wall without crushing my finger, because I want to have the ability, if I need to go to a quick thumb brace. And that's more of a defensive application of that technique. But for me, I try to keep the competitive shooting stuff and the defensive application stuff as similar, as consistent as possible, so I'm not having to change, if I have to grab my PCC to defend my home, or grab my rifle out of my vehicle, or whatever else, if that makes sense, okay? Brian Schuler, drop, drive, pull, press will make a huge difference. I do recommend y'all go both to my YouTube and Wilson Combat YouTube channel, where I teach the stance and position in detail, or you check out the PCC or the rifle program, where I break it down into full session by session, step-by-step drills that you can follow along. That's all on my website. You can find that. I'm not going to promote that here. Okay. Most stage turrets stock on belt, stock on shoulder. Chris, I think you're probably going to find most start positions are going to be stock on belt that I found in the past. Maybe that's varying or changing, but I think that stock on belt position is something you need to be really good. And understand, there's some really good PCC shooters out there that start, some of them start with the stock on belt like this, and they bring the guns straight up. I've not found, maybe it's my body size or position, I don't find I can do that as fast. For me, I like to have that muzzle in position. Like if I were using the camera, I've got the muzzle with my right eye lined up, right? So I'm closing my eye just to verify that, because I'm left eye dominant. But if I'm shooting the PCC rifle on my right shoulder, I'm using my right eye. If I switch to my left shoulder, I use my left eye. I have to do that, right? But when I have that position set up, right, from here, I'm going to drive the gun straight out, so it's off of my body, right, and make contact with my shoulder, right, straight out there to my position. And that's how I get it to my shoulder very fast. That motion. One last thing, one last tip for you. When you're working on this, don't think just about the stock. Think about the front of the gun. Think about taking this hand, right, and pushing it straight out toward the target, very fast, like this, like that. Watch it, like this. All right. So I'm pushing that out there very, very quickly to build that mount position. Okay. So there's some speed tricks for you. I said I would teach some recoil control secrets. Okay, folks, I don't have much more time. 103 on. I think we hit 113, which is really impressive. I truly appreciate those of you that jump on these live streams. Miss Chris with IDPA has been requesting the PCC cycle for a while. We talked about the overall gun setup. I worked my way. If you didn't see the entire video, from the back of the gun all the way to the front of the gun, right? So go ahead and rewind if you haven't seen that, because I talked about stock and stock positions. I talked about, the charging handle. I talked about the ambi safeties. By the way, this is the tack latch. I have two charging handles on these two guns. I didn't talk a lot about them. One is the Wilson Combat Ambi. The other one is the tack latch, once again made by Techwell, which makes the magwell. That's my favorite magwell. They're both good, but my point is I like an ambi charging handle. I like an ambi safety. Then we move forward. We talked about the Techwell. We talked about the trigger. We talked about the optic color and mounting position and why I went back and forth. And then eventually we moved our way up to the front of the gun to both the handguard. Oh, speaking of the handguard, you'll notice that my handguards are as long as I can get them on the guns. So having a long handguard gives me more room on the handguard to be bracing against the wall. So it offers a better bracing or shooting position for the handguard itself, okay? And let's see, I have some new comments down here. Sheila was looking forward for the Facebook Live PCC. You're welcome, Sheila. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a couple things. And yes, blame Chris, folks. All right, that's all I have, 8:24. No more time. Next week, I should be live on Wednesday morning again. I'd love for you to join me. If you watch this live stream, folks, get on Instagram, follow me. Tell people, hey, Mike Seeklander does a live stream. Take a screenshot of me right now here. I'll give you a screenshot you can post on social and tag me. Here we go. How's this? Did you get it? That looks pretty cool. I'm just kidding. Anyways, tell people we're on. Tell people we're talking about PCC, because the stuff that we'll talk about next week on PCC will apply with defensive rifle as well. So the drop, drive, pull, press, I'm going to get into detail. I'm going to talk a little bit about transitioning, and then I'm also going to talk about getting your body into position to shoot around obstacles. Because with the PCC or potentially with a rifle, and we'll talk maybe a little bit about cover, we come into position all of the times that we have to figure out the wall position, like how do we shoot around the edge of the wall. I failed miserably on a stage at the PCC Nationals one year, several years ago, when I really thought I could shoot a bunch of targets on my right shoulder, and I found out when I got in that position, I should have mounted and shot them exclusively on my left shoulder, which, interestingly enough, I had trained for. I practiced that a bunch, and I just didn't use that skill in the match. That was a failure of my mental execution there because I was scared to do it. So anyways, there's a lesson for you, folks. Thank you for joining me this morning. I appreciate all of you that showed up. If you're just watching this later on, hey, click the rewind button, watch the whole thing. Tell people about next week. Tell them we're going live Wednesday morning, 7:30 a.m., PCC, how to lean around cover, what I call the extreme rollout, drop, drive, pull, press, and more recoil control secrets, okay? All right, folks, that's all I have. Thank you all. Have a nice day. And until then, train hard.